In the spring of 1846, dozens of families packed everything they owned into wooden wagons and set out for California. They were chasing a dream of fertile land, a better life, a fresh start. Many had sold their homes. Some had spent their entire savings preparing for the journey. Parents traveled with young children. Newlyweds traveled with hope. Everyone believed they were heading toward a brighter future. None of them knew they were riding toward one of the greatest disasters in American history. This is the story of the Donner Party and how a single decision turned a journey of hope into a nightmare. At the time, America was expanding westward. California seemed like paradise. Stories spread across the country about rich farmland, mild weather, and endless opportunities. Thousands of settlers headed west. Most followed well-established routes. The journey was dangerous, but it was possible. The Donner Party planned to do the same. The group consisted of nearly 90 people, men, women, children, entire families. Among them were the Donner and Reed families, whose names would later become forever linked with tragedy. At first, everything went according to plan. The wagons rolled across the plains. Campfires burned beneath the stars. Children laughed and played. Although the journey was difficult, spirits remained high. California seemed closer every day. Then they heard about a shortcut. The shortcut was known as Hastings Cutoff. It promised to save valuable time. The man promoting it claimed it was faster than the traditional route. Many travelers ignored the advice. But the Donner Party decided to take the risk. It would become the most important decision of their lives, and the worst. At first, the shortcut didn't seem so bad, but soon, the terrain became brutal. The wagons struggled across difficult ground. The travelers were forced to clear roads themselves. Progress slowed to a crawl. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Every delay pushed them closer to winter, yet many still believed they could make it. Surely, things thing'd improve. Surely the worst was behind them. It wasn't. The worst hadn't even begun. As summer faded into autumn, the travelers realized they were running out of time. The mountains ahead were already growing colder. Nights became freezing. Food supplies slowly diminished. The animals pulling the wagons were exhausted. Still, they pressed forward. They had no choice. Turning back was nearly impossible. California remained their only hope. Then came the snow. At first it seemed harmless, just a light dusting across the mountain peaks. Some even admired its beauty. But within days everything changed. Storm clouds gathered over the Sierra Nevada mountains. The winds grew stronger. The temperature dropped. And then the sky unleashed its fury. Snow began falling heavily, hour after hour, day after day. The mountain passes disappeared beneath deep drifts. The trails vanished. The wagons could no longer move. The travelers were trapped. At first, many believed the storm would pass, perhaps in a few days, perhaps a week. But the snow kept coming. Soon, some drifts stood higher than a man. The mountains had become a prison. The settlers built crude shelters near a frozen lake. Others tried to improve abandoned cabins. Families crowded together for warmth. The winter had arrived, and it had arrived early. Their food stores were limited. Rescue was hundreds of miles away, and no one knew they were trapped. For the first time, fear began spreading through the camp, because everyone understood one terrifying fact: they were completely alone. And winter was only beginning. They had entered the mountains searching for a better life. Now they were fighting simply to survive, and the snow showed no signs of stopping. The nightmare begins. The snow did not stop. Days passed, then weeks. Every morning, the settlers woke to find even more snow covering the mountains around them. The world beyond their camp had disappeared. Trails were buried. Landmarks vanished. The passes that could have led them to safety were now blocked by walls of ice and snow. The Donner Party was trapped, and with every passing day, their chances of survival grew smaller. At first, people tried to remain hopeful. They carefully rationed their food. Every meal became smaller. Every day brought new discussions about rescue. Someone would come for them. Someone had to. But no rescue arrived, and food continued to disappear. The oxen were slaughtered first, then the cattle, then the horses. Every animal represented another few days of life. But eventually, there were no animals left. The settlers ate every scrap they could find. Nothing could be wasted. Nothing. As winter tightened its grip, hunger became the center of everyone's life. People talked about food constantly. They dreamed about food. They remembered meals from years earlier. Some could barely think about anything else. Parents watched their children grow weaker. Children cried themselves to sleep. The cold was terrible. But the hunger was worse. Far worse. Soon people began eating things that were never meant to be food. Animal hides, leather straps, pieces of old shoes. Anything that might provide even the smallest amount of nourishment. The line between survival and desperation was disappearing. By December, it became clear that waiting for rescue was no longer enough. If nobody came soon, everyone would die. A desperate plan was formed. A small group would attempt to cross the mountains on foot. If they could reach civilization, they could bring help back. The mission seemed nearly impossible. The snow was incredibly deep. The temperatures were brutal. Many believed that the volunteers were walking towards certain death, but they had no other choice. In mid-December, 17 people left the camp. Men, women, teenagers. They became known as the Forlorn Hope, the Lost Hope, and their journey would become one of the most desperate survival marches in American history. The conditions were worse than anyone had imagined. The travelers struggled through deep snow. Every step required enormous effort. The cold seemed endless. Some collapsed from exhaustion. Others became separated. The food they carried vanished quickly. Then starvation returned, more brutal than before. Days passed. People began dying, one by one. The mountains showed no mercy. The survivors pressed onward, driven by a single thought: reach help or die trying. Back at the camp, conditions continued to deteriorate. The settlers waited, and waited, and waited. No rescue appeared. Food was gone. The cold remained relentless. Families huddled together inside crude shelters. Some no longer had the strength to leave their beds. Others spent entire days staring silently into the fire. The camp had become a place of suffering, a place where hope was slowly fading. Yet somehow, people continued fighting to survive. Parents sacrificed for their children. Neighbors shared what little they had. Even in the darkest moments, many refused to give up. Then at last salvation appeared. Months after the settlers became trapped, word of their situation finally reached California. Rescue parties were organized immediately, but even the rescuers struggled against the mountains. The snow remained deep. The weather remained dangerous. Every mile was a challenge. When the first rescue team finally reached the camp, the sight shocked them. The survivors were barely recognizable, thin, weak, exhausted. Many had lost family members. Many had lost all hope. Yet they were alive, and that alone felt miraculous. The rescue teams could not save everyone at once. The journey back through Tinsoy traversing through the Titans. Ladanya journey through the mountains was too dangerous. Instead, they evacuated survivors in groups. Each trip carried people away from the nightmare, but many were still left behind, waiting, praying, hoping they would survive long enough for the next rescue party to arrive. Several more expeditions would be needed before the ordeal finally ended. By the time the last survivors emerged from the mountains, the Donner Party had become a symbol of tragedy, a warning about the dangers of the frontier and the terrible consequences of a single decision. The journey to California had begun with optimism. Families dreamed of a better future. Children laughed beside wagon trains. The road ahead seemed full of promise, but one shortcut changed everything. A route that was supposed to save time instead stole months, and those months allowed winter to catch them. The mountains did the rest. Today, nearly 2 centuries later, the story of the Donner Party remains one of the most haunting survival stories in American history. Not because the settlers were weak, not because they were reckless, but because they were ordinary people. Mothers, fathers, children, people who believed they were making the right choice. People who never imagined that one decision would place them face to face with one of the harshest winters imaginable. The snow eventually melted, the mountains opened once again, but the story of the Donner Party never disappeared, because it reminds us of something we often forget. Sometimes the most dangerous choices don't look dangerous at all. Sometimes they look like shortcuts. They set out in search of a better life. Instead, they became part of one of the most tragic survival stories ever told.